Well, welcome everybody. I'm David Zuckerman, your Lieutenant Governor. I really appreciate folks coming in for this conversation today around the impact of COVID and our tourism economy. We know that Vermont is hugely dependent on tourism from summer festivals, fall foliage, winter skiing, uh, conferences, opportunities for Vermonters and others to just really enjoy all that Vermont has to offer. And today we're going to be talking about the COVID impact on this economy because we know we've all heard about it. Our restaurants, our bed and breakfasts, our hotels, the hospitality industry have really seen a lot. And over the last month, we've seen more tourists coming to Vermont to enjoy the vibrant fall foliage and the art, dining, the adventure that Vermont has to offer. Many, especially those in the hospitality industry, have welcomed this additional activity. They've got bills to pay. Others who live in tourist destinations, we've seen in social media and in the news, or those who work in the communities have also been expressing some concern about whether or not added tourism brings potential health or safety risks. So joining me to talk about the impact of COVID on tourism, our businesses, communities, and economy are Representative Diane Lanpher, who is the clerk of the House Committee on Appropriations from Virgins, and Sabel Courtney, a candidate for the Vermont House from the Stowe area. Might be another town. She can help clarify that for me in a minute. First, I'd like to just have them each introduce themselves. So, Representative Lanpher, why don't you mention who you are and what you do in your background and your committee?
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. It's an honor to be here and to be with Joe and to be on your show today to talk about some of the things that have happened. So I'm Diane Lanpher, Representative Lanpher, and I'm currently in my 6th term or my 12th year in the Vermont House. I've served on the House Transportation Committee and 6 years on the House Appropriations Committee. And as you mentioned, I was a clerk, so I keep track of the paperwork. That's a little bit about where I am and what I do. And in this recent session, because of the impact and the amount of support that was made available to Vermont, which was unprecedented with about $2,000 per person in Vermont. We thank our federal delegation and, having Senator Patrick Leahy and Bernie Sanders and Peter Welch in Washington, we received a good amount of money. And I'll just continue to answer any questions that you have about it. Thanks.
Yeah, we'll talk about that as well. It really is a remarkable, we are so fortunate with a small state minimum and the work that our federal delegation did. My understanding is we maybe received as much as $400 or $500 million more resources, on a overall aggregate than maybe we would have otherwise. And I am truly frightened to think about what would have happened if we didn't have those additional resources. And certainly the governor gets a lot of credit for handing out the money. But the reality is, if the money hadn't been obtained by our federal delegation, it wouldn't have been there to hand out. Joe Sabel, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, and thank you, Lieutenant Governor, for having me today. I'm really honored and for bringing us together for this important topic. And thank you, Diane, my friend, for your expertise and for also joining us today. And thank you to everyone who's joining us. I'm Sabel Courtney, and I'm running for the House seat in Stowe. It is the District Limois 1, and it is just Stowe. And I've lived here for 30 years, and my work has primarily been marketing tourism and the arts. I serve on the Vermont Arts Council. I believe this is my last year, which makes me very sad. And for nearly 10 years, I promoted Stowe internationally and domestically as PR and international marketing manager for Stowe Area Association, which is the destination marketing organization for Stowe. I've also served as tourism representative for the Vermont Department of Tourism and as events and membership coordinator for Vermont Gay Tourism Association. I've partnered with organizations locally, regionally, nationally, and internationally promoting Stowe and Vermont in the US, the UK, Ireland, Germany, France, Scandinavia, Japan, Canada, and yes, Iceland. So that's pretty much my CV, and I'm happy to talk, especially today. My expertise is in marketing and answering any questions or any other questions that come along. Thank you.
Absolutely. Probably a side note, we won't get into details on it, but I've been thinking that our state colleges, which badly need more students, especially some out-of-state students, to help pay for the way that we can keep our state colleges open. I think with a good COVID health record, we could even market our higher education opportunities for kids. But That's another topic for another day. Folks can reach out to my campaign, Zuckerman, FORVT.com, if you want to explore that some more. And I also want to thank you, Sabel, for the involvement you've been. You just said you were on the Arts Council and the Vermont Department of Tourism Board. And when I think about all the Vermonters who give time and effort and energy to our community in the broader sense, it's not always what we do every day is for ourselves. It's for this broader success of our state, of our communities, whether it's the tourism industry, the arts, the volunteer fire squads. I mean, people in Vermont really do extra, and it helps all of us. So thank you for that.
Yes.
Um, Absolutely. I want to remind those who are watching, if you have questions or thoughts about the tourism or the hospitality industry, what the issues are with COVID, good, bad, and different, please post them in the comments section, and we will try to bring them into the conversation for the three of us. Has your business been impacted by COVID? Do you work in the hospitality industry? Are you worried about tourists not respecting the need to quarantine or follow the mask mandate? Are you in the restaurant business and have concerns about peers not following the guidelines? I've heard from some folks about that. Would you support more or fewer monitoring protocols of your patrons in an effort to address risk? We want to hear from you as we discuss tourism during COVID. So let's start by talking about the challenges we're facing due to COVID and the needs we're hearing from businesses around the state. I want to throw out the question, what can we do as either individuals or as a state? Because it's not always the state that's going to make it all happen. What can we do to support small businesses and their employees right now? I'm curious if either of the two you want to throw out some thoughts people can do.
Sure. Well, I get takeout every week, at least once a week. So that helps. As we're all being, let's not kid ourselves. The winter's coming and it's going to be hard, and our businesses are going to be impacted. Especially as much as we all would desire going into a warm, comfy restaurant and sitting with our friends inside, it's going to be really challenging to do that because of the restrictions for health. We're also going into what we call a shoulder season, which is November, where we don't have folks coming. And we are also, I just sound like Debbie Downer, but we're coming out of a drought. I mean, we have to be realistic. We're coming out of a drought. Do we have enough snow to make snow? Will it be cold enough to make snow? These are all things that we think about. And I've, been so involved with in a resort community, especially a ski resort. And so these are issues that we're going to have to deal with. We were talking today about the restricted access to skiing for a lot of folks. And also something that's really kind of troubling that's just happened is that we're surrounded by red zones again. So when we have skiing starting up again, will those zones turn at least yellow or green so that they can come? That's our ski market to a great extent. Internationally, we're not getting folks, and I could talk all day. I've been speaking to a number of my friends in the international market, and happy to talk to anybody about the possibilities there, because there are a lot, and it will be pent up. They will come again. So to help our properties right now, again, as much as we can support them financially, and we need federal money. ACCD, we have more grants coming, which is great, and that's going to have to help them as well. So moral support, just helping them in any way that we can. We're communities, and they are members of our community.
Do you know what percentage of the ski industry historically has been foreign travelers versus out-of-state travelers versus in-state skiers? Just to give some.
I don't know that. Ski Vermont would have that information for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But we have, in terms of international marketing, we used to do ski shows all over the world. I mean, in the UK, huge market, and ski groups coming, huge market. We have international, in the past, we've had international reps. When we had Massport before 9/11, there were reps who we worked with all over the world. So we have a rep in Scandinavia, and so we could just go do a sales mission. So we had folks coming from South America, was huge. And then there was turmoil in South America, and that kind of dried up. But we had a lot of folks coming from South America for skiing as well. So now I'm not sure what it is, but Ski Vermont would know.
But maybe this winter we'll need more Vermonters if they have the resources to
Absolutely
hit our slopes, help our ski industry, I know there's a lot of changes happening at the base lodges in terms of whether you can go inside or grab a quick beer outside, or maybe they're setting up outdoor heating areas.
Mhm.
But I think, our ski industry is certainly being very creative. And I know restaurants are also working hard to make sure they have the proper spacing, so that folks can dine, but be far enough apart. And also with, good tracing so that people at the restaurant, give your name and number so that if anybody got sick, say the night you were eating there, our state contact tracing
Yeah.
teams would have an easier time making sure that if one person got sick, that maybe not 30, 50, or 200 get sick over the course of the next few days. I mean, it's really a community effort to make sure we keep track of where we are and give information so that any kind of outbreak, and thankfully Vermonters, I think, have been really stellar at looking out for each other, wearing masks even before the mandate. Most would do it. I think some of the credit for how well Vermont's done
Mm.
is really due to Vermonters, Vermont business owners, and thankfully the geography of the state. We're fairly spread out. We don't have major dense um, living quarters, like some of the big cities do. Diane, what would some of your thoughts be on that issue of sort of what are you hearing from businesses in your area, or as appropriations committee, what came in during the discussions of the budget?
So thank you for asking. I think when you just mentioned it, I think what I picked up from there was what you just said. What can we do now? So when we're looking at it, whether long term or in the past or where we are, but I think your question was right now, what are we doing? And there was there's the immediate need, and then there's looking over the horizon to see where we might be into the future, and we need to prepare for the fact that could be, going to be happening well into the summer, uh, which I hope it's in a better situation, but I
Right.
do believe that going into this winter right now. So what we could do right now, and some of the things that we've put in place in the Appropriations Committee, and this would go the same within my community, is employees. If you're looking at a situation, whether you're looking at a career change, or maybe you've got time, but the state colleges, we provided that you can go to for some retraining. So for employees, the retraining part, if that's where you're at, or the housing issues that we've put out there, the monies for rental assistance, mortgage assistance, and other ways to assist, the unemployment insurance, although Vermont just recently, now this week, has been basically upgraded because our unemployment is actually doing a little bit better. So our extended benefits it will be impacted. But for the employers, I think Joe just mentioned the grants, which is really important. If you don't mind because the plug for that is at the Agency of Community Commerce and Community Development, which is accd.vermont.gov, has right now the webinars are in progress. Yesterday was one that you can go and watch, and there's one tomorrow that you can go and sign up for at 10 o'clock for employers to be able to take a look at, can they qualify, how do they qualify, how do you apply for the expanded economic recovery dollars that we put in, hundreds of millions of dollars that have been going through stages since we've been there. So I'll just, in a nutshell, there is a very good program right now for employers to apply for, and it's changed. From the beginning, it was at 75% impacted revenue, then it went to 50%, and now we're at where we're looking at being able to just talk with them about where you're impacted, and the amount that you are able to access is not the max at 50,000, it's now at $300,000. So even if your business has partake of other opportunities for some, I call it some sustainability grants, please take a quick look at this and see if there's more opportunity. What I hear from people in my own community, which, by the way, my daughter is executive chef for 3 restaurants in the area, so I have a sort of a canary in the in the coal mine with my daughter's situation. Plus, my district mate is also in the legislature and runs a restaurant right here in Virgins, as well as some other industries. Little known, We have an incredible dog kennel and grooming place right here in Virgins that
Wow.
what the trickle down impact of the tourism is that their business, people aren't traveling, so they're not boarding their dogs. People aren't traveling, so they're not bringing their dogs that typically would stay with them. And that has significantly impacted their business. But I would not typically have seen them as being one of the tourist impacted businesses in Vermont. But they are totally reliant on the level of their business by people's travel. Ski industry, and I could go on and on because we've got a lot. I don't want to take up all your time, but we were very specific in the current bill to not only have the grants for businesses, but there was long conversations about making sure that there was very specific money, Joe, for especially for the ski industry, that there was that doesn't preclude them from being able to participate in those other grants, but we wanted to make sure that coming into this winter that they had some very specific dollars for them to do the things. Industry innovates. We can help to support them by providing the dollars that they might need to create that outdoor environment, to create those heaters. So that's what our role is. And it's shifting. Even just this morning, the Joint Fiscal Committee. So dollars that are there, right, that had gone out the door, or at least out to agencies, we're constantly monitoring. How is it doing? Is it what we call, is it being, if we put $300 million in and only $100 million worth the distribution occurred, then we are constantly rebalancing that. Where should we maybe move it from here to where it needs to go? So up until December, we don't want to have anything left on the table of this. And all right, I'll stop talking.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important point. The state received a lot of resources, but if my understanding is correct, they need to be out the door by December 30th or 31st, and any dollars that the state does not distribute will be forfeited back to the federal government. So it's important for, restaurants to think about what resources could they bring in from the state through these grants to keep their employees working, to even have them make meals. There's a program called Everyone Eats that was actually on public radio today. I had a press conference about it this summer. I know, Diane, your district mate, Matt Byrong, had a lot to do with that, along with Gene O'Sullivan from Burlington. And I worked with them both when I heard about skinny pancake and shift meals. And there were people down in Brattleboro also running restaurants saying, okay, we have PPP money. We don't have restaurant patrons in our restaurant. This was back in March and April. And they said, all right, let's use our PPP money to keep our employees working, making meals for hungry Vermonters and distributing those meals. And the Everyone Eats program was a $5 million augment to try to extend that out. I think I heard on the radio today to produce as many as 400,000 meals for Vermonters. But that's both a lot of meals and it's not so many meals. When you think about, if 60, 70, 80,000 Vermonters have filed for unemployment at some point over these last 7-8 months, just a few days of unemployment and you've got as many meals as 400,000 meals where people are unemployed needing food. Obviously, not everyone the minute they're unemployed has no resources. And thankfully we have, a very robust unemployment fund. I think we've used about half of that. But through the winter, it's going to continue to be depleted. So we got to get these other resources out the door, keep people working. Joe Sabel, looked like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to commend Diane because if I was Debbie Downer, you were Debbie Upper. So you brought some sunshine. So I think it's important for our tourism industry in our town and across the state to know what's available and how they are being taken care of as best as possible by our state and by our legislature. Because I think a lot of times you feel like you're alone in the woods and they're not. Yeah. And the creativity of we have a skinny pancake, thank you, now here in Stowe. And this is the community coming together and the organizations. This is who we are as Vermonters. And this is what's really going to help us to carry the day. Food security is going to be even more real. Heat insecurity is going to be real. So helping each other is important.
I just want to point out that, the legislature has done along with, with the administration, But Vermont is different in a lot of ways, and most of that we really do enjoy being our Vermont way. But unlike other states, that any of that dollars we talked about at the beginning that came in, some federal relief, in other states, they did not do the things that we did. Some of the reasons because their executive branch has total control over that money, and the legislature does not. In Vermont, the legislature has a big say. I don't think you wouldn't have seen these this popping up. This wasn't on the radar screen until we all worked together to get this done. And that's one of the things that happens in my committee, is that other committees of jurisdiction, whether you're in ag or in commerce, or that they work on the issues and come forward, like Lieutenant Governor said, on the Everyone Eats program. Our doors were open and everybody went to work. This did not happen in other states. Other states did not have the massive business subsidies that went out the door. And so I'm very proud of our legislature for taking the reins and being very seriously, diligently working with this.
Yeah, and we are quite dependent on tourism. We've tried to make year-round opportunities for tourists. Joe Sabel talked about how we're on one of the shoulder seasons. Often we call it stick season. Our two extra seasons, stick season and mud season, of course, where this is a little bit of a pause moment where we can look at what's working, look at what isn't working, or maybe working well enough. But the diversity of what our ski industry has done. They've added biking trails. We've built convention centers. People come for our beer, wine, and spirits. Of course, cannabis was just passed, so in a couple of years they might come for that too. We have, of course, the lake activities, both summer and winter, including fishing out in the shanties, in the huts, which that is something where people do alone, which is probably a good thing. But maybe there's ways to expand that opportunity. So what can we do right now to support the Vermonters who are out of work due to COVID? How can we utilize their skills in a safe way? Are there creative things you're hearing that are happening out there that can help with this? I mean, I don't even know all that's going on. Everyone's scrambling. I felt lucky on our farm because we mostly work outside. So our employees were all able to keep coming to work. And we said, okay, in the barn, you wear masks, but we'll keep the doors open so you get airflow going through. Not every business can do that. And obviously, a lot of restaurants had heated outdoor dining for the fall where they had tents or they put heat up. Some probably are still doing it to a point. How long are we going to be able to do that? And what are some of the other ways we can transition safely for that tourism industry?
Well, I think that, we were, if there's anything fortunate about when this first happened, it was in a mud season, a shoulder season. So we don't always have a lot of business there. We want to fix that in the future. We want, midweek, that's the dream, midweek year round. So we had a chance to prepare. So people did get creative and they put in place programs and procedures so that they could move forward. And I think that they'll bring that into the fall and continue to use that. I just want to back up a little bit. And when you talk about all of the things that that generate tourism here, and people often forget, I work a lot with one of the top wedding planners in the state. That's a $400 million industry. And the Vermont Association of Wedding Planners are very robust, and they are keeping their members all involved and informed and taking the initiative. This is creativity. They're taking the initiative themselves and they're holding Zoom seminars, and they're having roundtables and talking. And this is one of those industries that I think we don't always look at as, oh my gosh, can we expand on this? Which is what we do. These folks come and man, do they spend money. And every one of our weddings, they're in next year. We had nothing this year, zip, nothing. And there are a number of businesses that have been in some real jeopardy because people aren't getting tents, they're not getting caterers, they're not doing all these things. And the other one is the arts. And, I'm a huge proponent my whole life. And especially in Stowe, I co-founded the Stowe Theater Guild. I've, executive directed arts organizations and had huge festivals. And So that's something also that we need to keep uppermost. The Vermont creative economy is huge. It's not only performing arts, it's not just visual arts. It's like you said, the breweries, it's film and tech. So these are all people we bring under our umbrella and continue to collaborate and create and sustain these relationships. And this isn't just in Vermont. We have New England Foundation for the Arts. We have NEA. There are a lot of organizations that we can be a member of, and many of us are, to just realize that we're not alone and that we can all work through this together.
Yeah, I was wondering, there was, I have a neighbor who does sound system for big events. You
Sure.
know, the college graduations, the big summer festivals. He lost basically all his business, and many of the tent companies lost a lot of their business. Many of those, thankfully, have, you know, been hired up by the schools to create outdoor classrooms and some other ways where folks have shifted on the fly. But, you know, in literally in my campaign, we had a music series where we just hired musicians for half the donations that would come in that night. Went to the musicians and half went to the campaign. It might only be $50 or $150. You know, it was just something we tried to do. And if folks are out there who, you know, want to support a local musician, you could think about hosting a concert that, you know, you put on your own Facebook page. And I don't know if some of the restaurants and whatever's or more of the hotels are thinking of doing this, to say, you know what, folks, if you're home in your hotel tonight, here's a local musician that's going to perform from his or her living room, and you can watch it. And that way, and then, you know, try to donate to keep those musicians going, because again, the musical activities, that whole sector is also reliant not only on Vermonters,
Well, and
but
that's what I'm talking about. And, you know, a big shout out to Higher Ground for a number of reasons. Many of the concerts that they did at the fairgrounds. They did a drive-in. They had Grace Potter perform twice. They had some incredible acts there. So you drive in and you had like a 4x4 in front of your car that you could sit, and everybody was spaced. And you know, the stage was way up here, and there was a screen, so you got to see it, and you saw Grace live. It's not, let's not kid ourselves, it's never going to be, because as a performer, I know you got to get that energy going back and forth, and it's really hard to do in that, but it helped. And they sold a lot of tickets, and Higher Ground gave a lot of money to the Vermont Arts Council. So thanks to you guys. You're amazing. And throughout the whole time, I mean, that's what artists do. They're creative. Jump out of that box. You know, there is no box. Let's just fit, you know, because this is an opportunity to really do some fun stuff, and nobody's going to go, that's weird. You know, we're just going to try it. We're just going to do it. And that's where I think the hope is. So yeah, but we have a lot of resources in terms of who we are in tourism, if you're just going to talk tourism.
So I was going to say, my husband is a trumpet player. You know, he's an insurance agent, but 38 years as a professional trumpet player in many aspects. And he's on the board of the Virgins Opera House. So as you were speaking of that, you know, how they're working and changing on the fly. There's virtual concerts now that, you know, it's not the same as being there, but it does happen. And you know, and keeping people safe. I would agree that there are some in the tourism piece, like right around in my district here, Basin Harbor. You know, they're going through some pretty dramatic changes. The hospitality industry, when we look at all the industries that are impacted by COVID, is the most by far impacted industry of all. And so I think, you know, what Vermonters can do and have been doing, as if we can, is stay vacations. People have been booking 3-day stay vacations just right down at Basin Harbor. You don't have to go far to have a fabulous time and support our local hospitality. I know it's probably not the industry tourism piece, but some of what we're doing on housing, as far as like being able to provide housing at a time when we needed to get people who were homeless in an isolated place, but being able to support our hotels with that. And it's a public health issue, and it helps to keep our hotels, or at least some of them, with some patrons. And we've been done a remarkable job with that as well.
Diane, maybe you can help answer this question. We have one on Facebook from
Okay.
Maria that said, as a choral director who has been unable to meet with my choir except through Zoom, what does the future look like for the arts? You know, we just were talking some about this, artists and the institutions that hold performances like the Flynn. What kind of funding is available for artists who are without work right now?
Yeah.
You know, I know that at first unemployment was difficult because a lot of independent businesses don't always pay into some of the different systems, and so they weren't eligible. I think that was expanded so they were
Yes.
eligible, but at the same time, the system had a hard time processing and the resources and the, you know, I would argue the administration was caught a little flat-footed on that, but hopefully that's been improved some. But can you, you know, you're
Yep.
on appropriations. What were some of the things that were done for that sector?
So you're right. You're very, very this is why the 150 members in the House, having people who are a part of this arts community, bringing forward. We had a very specific grants that not only came in directly from the federal government that didn't have to come through the state, went directly out through. I think Joe had mentioned the NEA from and the Vermont puts them together as well. So I would believe that checking out the ACCD resources, because the resources that are there under resources for businesses, resources for individuals, and resources for communities. This would be if she's a choral director with a school associated or on her own.
Sounds like it might have been out of more of a performance, not school-based, because
Perform.
she was talking about the Flynn and
Okay.
maybe the places that they would do that. Maybe she can, if she's still watching, can offer us more information. I know there was a lot of concern around choral opportunities because that's such a voice projection thing, and it was all about, you know, I remember hearing, I don't remember if it was
Yes.
in Seattle, some real spreader cases that were concerned from that, which I have to say, I'll tell a quick sort of funny story that running the state Senate, we would do the Pledge of Allegiance once a week, and we would all try to say it at the same time, which through Zoom really did not work. So I don't know how a choral director, maybe there's a different program that works better than Zoom for that, but would be very impressed if people were
There
able to
are,
do
and
singing.
you can actually get folks to harmonize too. But it's again, it's going to be on Zoom. So
So while you guys are talking, I'm going to try to see if I can find and maybe put up in the chat box
well, and
the arts website
yeah,
grants.
Vermont Arts Council also, because what
There
we
it is.
focused on this year, there were two things that at our retreat that we focused on, because COVID relief took just absolutely so much bandwidth in the beginning. And a big shout out to the Vermont Arts Council and that staff, Karen
Yeah.
Middleman, Amy Cunningham, all those guys just really rose to the occasion and got it out the door. That's all that we did, and they did. And the other thing was racial justice. Those were the two things that we focused on because it was so timely. Um, so, but there, I would suggest to Maria. Hi, Maria. I think I know who that is, by the way. Hi, Maria.
Vermont is a wonderfully small state. I just met
Diane
someone
knows it
last night.
too.
I met someone last night on the phone who had met my spouse contra dancing in Saratoga Springs 19 years ago. And it was the first time he and I had ever spoken. But he said, you know, I know someone who's a farmer in Heinsberg. I think her name was Rachel. I said, well, where'd you meet
Mm,
her? Dancing at the dance floor. I said, you know, that's a
That's where
Vermont
she was.
story for you, if ever there was one.
But Maria, I also want to mention that something that Lyric Theater, another big shout out to them,
yeah.
extraordinarily creative. And they're actually in the world of the arts, they're actually asking people for brainstorming, which is one other way, crowdsourcing information. That's what we do. We work together. And they went to the Trapp Family Lodge, the Concert Meadow, where I used to actually produce concerts, which is a pretty awesome place. It is huge. And you could space really, really well and have a few hundred people there. So they did a cabaret with young singers, mostly young singers, who wanted to get the experience and wanted to be out there. And it was free. And so it was completely safe. The stage was way back here. We were here as an audience. We could do our usual picnicking business. We just couldn't visit with everybody, but everybody wins. And because it's a big enough space and they were creative enough, and that's how we have to do it. Now, weather is going to be a tough one. That's going to be a tough one. But I'm just so proud of the arts community and the tourism community in Vermont and how creative they've been. And that's just creativity begets more creativity. We're just going to keep rolling.
So
Well, and you know,
I just
yeah,
looked
go
up
ahead.
the Vermont Arts Council, their website, vermontartscouncil.org. And there are grants in there for COVID-19 and Vermont's Art Council grant maker and other opportunities that are there that I would definitely go check that out. And if none of that works, wherever she lives, she can call her local representative or senator and see how put us to work to help to find you some more answers.
Yeah, it's really been remarkable the amount of work that legislators have done. I remember when the unemployment system wasn't working out very well, the House members literally, I think, all got training in how to really help people through that system. And it's one of those things that, I hear grumbling sometimes about legislators or your pay, which, by the way, folks don't realize there's no benefits to your job, no health benefits. When
No
you drive back
retirement.
and forth to Montpelier,
Wait.
you get money for that, but then the rest of the year when you're driving to meetings, you get no money, local community meetings. And really, our legislators across all parties have done a tremendous amount of work trying to help people. And I think, Diane, you mentioned it right there. If you're out there in any kind of situation and you've been, whether it's impacted by COVID or not, we know there are, tens of thousands of Vermonters have filed for unemployment. We know, I heard literally 3 weeks ago now from a Capstone agency that we had 3,000 applicants for heating assistance when a year ago at the same moment there were 1,000 applicants. We know that folks are way more food insecure, and these were already issues before the pandemic started. And both the nonprofit sector, state resources to help the nonprofit sector, as well as the business sector and individuals with supports, are happening. And there's also uh, community mutual aid groups. There are many of them. I think it was the Vermont Council on Rural Development at one point had a
Yes.
list of mutual aid groups, which is just folks in a community saying once a week or more frequently, we're going to come together and check in on people. We're going to bring them food. We're going to bring them basic supplies. I was in Johnson a few weeks back, and they have a pizza oven, and once a week, folks would come together. Farms would donate some of the ingredients. Volunteers would come together and make two,
Oops,
three
sorry.
hundred pizzas to feed people. And so there are just amazing efforts by Vermonters happening everywhere, and your local legislator is really a great resource for accessing or finding some of those supports. If you are really struggling, whether it's a local nonprofit, a local pop-up mutual aid that's not even technically a nonprofit, probably, or through the state services like heating assistance that are run through the capstone agencies and so forth. Um, so
And then,
as yeah, go ahead.
Lieutenant Governor, we don't work alone either. And so to even our legislative other that you don't have as a new legislator or an older legislators, you are not alone either. When we have questions, we contact each other. If you know who's on a committee, like you had mentioned, Gene O'Sullivan, who did an incredibly good job, on the Commerce Committee. You go to those sources. Don't think you have to have all the answers. We've got incredibly smart people to go to. Sometimes you wonder if you're the one that is the going to on some things, but we do put it all together, and we'll, if I had a question around farm to plate or everyone eats, sir, I would be calling you.
Fair enough. Well, and some of the things we know going forward that we need to do, a lot of folks are looking out for their neighbors. We need to think about what we can be doing to take care of Vermonters, help businesses survive, and keep our economy churning. So when I think about that, I say, okay, folks, it's definitely easier to go on Amazon and just buy something and have it shipped. But we now know we can go into stores with a mask and buy. So sometimes for some, the dollar figure is the bottom line, and certainly you got to do what you can to survive. But for those that have a little bit more flexibility in your resources, if you are willing to take a little time, leave your house, go to your local store to buy the product you're looking for, instead of going online and getting it shipped in from who knows where around the world, you will be helping keep that business open. You'll be helping that employee in that business keep their job. And if we think about it, when an employee keeps their job in a store, they might then buy something from the hardware store because they're going to do a project, or they might hire a local carpenter. And so the more we spend our dollars locally, the more those dollars will churn in the economy and help keep other people employed, which means fed, which means a roof over their head, and so forth. So I don't know if either of you want to mention stuff about that. It looks like Sabel, you want to jump in.
Well,
Oh,
what that just immediately makes me go to the fact that, for a lot of folks, unemployment is ending at the end of the year, unless, hello, I'm going to say the hero's word, unless something happens with federal aid. And that's, as we all know, that's where the money often comes from. I mean, we became more robust economically after people got $600, which, some of it you might put in for a rainy day. I mean, you have to put some away for some taxes, but then they're going to go out to dinner, or they're going to buy a gift for someone, or they're going to buy something in their local store, which is what everyone was encouraged to do. And I think that a better marketing campaign, either shop here, work with our businesses to make sure, and we do some of that, and to make sure that that comes to fruition a little more. But we need that infusion, and I know, David, you know this. We need that infusion. So 48 hours I saw today. That's the deadline. It's like, we're going to do this in 48 hours. So they say in Washington.
we're going to do what in 48 hours? Do you want to describe what you're talking about?
To an agreement.
Sorry, what?
We're going to come to an agreement on the federal fund.
Nationally, you're talking about.
Yes, I'm talking about nationally. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So even if we don't, I'm sorry. Even if we don't get
Charlie.
more money, or it's an additional thing, if what we do have is allowed to be carried forward beyond December. So one of the things that you had mentioned, the December, anything that's left over, we're pulling back on December 20th, because one of the areas, because we strictly have to stay within the guidelines of COVID dollar allowability, but anything that's left over can go as a legitimate use to put into the unemployment trust fund, because we've gone through half of our trust fund. And so anything that's left over after Vermonters have had all of their opportunity, it's going to go in that direction. I wanted to bring out, well, we're talking about food and local business. Did you know that you could buy organically grown rice right here in Vermont, in Ferrisburg? It's grown, it's weeded by ducks. It's incredible. And they bake. I don't even have to go there, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. I can go online and order it, and they'll bring it to my house. Same thing with well, I live in Addison County, so I have rather a
lot of milk
store of myself that I can pick from. The farm just right down here in Panton. Get online, order a chicken and a dozen eggs, and they'll drop it off in my cooler. You remember the old milk? Well, maybe you don't. I just do because I'm older, but the milk boxes out front, the insulated milk boxes.
Yep.
There you go.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how COVID restructures our economy, restructures our communities, how we think about things. I remember back in March, we on my farm still had about 20,000 pounds of carrots that we planned to sell through March, April, and into May. And I think it was in about 2 or 3 weeks, we pretty much sold them all because the food chain around the country got disrupted. And so I think some of the opportunities that exist around rebuilding our economy with a more resilient agricultural sector, with more storage, more processing in years going forward, is a real opportunity. I think folks are recognizing that it's good to have a wide net of how trade and products move around, but it's also good to have enough being done locally that if the stuff hits the fan, that there are the resources and supplies we need. And not everyone, maybe Diane, can afford duck weeded rice. There's different circumstances out there for folks, and I think it's really important as we're tackling this crisis. I talked with a woman last night in Franklin County who's a grandmother in her 50s. She's taking care of 2 grandchildren that are from separate children of hers that have opioid concerns, and she goes from 6 in the morning till 12 at night, driving all 4 of those people to the various appointments they need for medically assisted treatment for their kids to get to school. And she's really at wit's end. And I think some of these things were happening before COVID. I think we have to recognize that we still have some fundamental inequities and some real struggles around the state. And it may be that from this COVID crisis, we're going to see different economic development. I know we've talked a lot about broadband, and we weren't able, my understanding is, to put money into immediately stringing broadband because the plans weren't there and the systems and the engineering and some of the network needs. But it may be that in the next year, now that the communications union districts are formed, if they've spent time this summer and fall to be ready for more COVID relief money, we could put people to work stringing broadband, which will create more economic opportunity in rural areas. It'll help with the educational opportunities in rural areas. It'll help with just communication in general, telehealth. So I think there's a lot of things that are going to change. And I don't know if either of you want to touch on a couple of those before I go to sort of the wrap up of what we can do as individuals to help our local communities, as you just said with the rice, but also where the state might be looking at opportunities.
What's the question?
Well, just sort of what are things that either individuals can do, communities can do, or the state can do to continue to take care of Vermonters who are falling through the cracks or to help businesses survive. Um, I just touched on broadband. I touched on, Diane touched on local food systems. I will say, I'll add a little to it while you can think. As a farm that has a CSA, community supported agriculture, this year we saw our farmers market sales drop to less than half because the number of people that were allowed at the market, including the number of people we could have at our stand, but we saw our CSA sales go up, and CSA is where people pre-buy for the season. But we also saw the stress that people are going through as we wrapped up our CSA season and we were trying to square up our books with our members and whether they'd overspent or underspent and things like that. It was really apparent the stress that people are going through, even those who are financially doing a little better, of just all of the change with kids at home, not at school, with running businesses and the stress of trying to keep employees employed. I mean, I know a lot of small business owners consider their employees like family, and they're really stressed out. So
I was
that's
just, the uncertainty is palpable in the communities when you go out there. People. I'm fortunate enough to have the diversity of the community that has some of those interesting pockets. But you're right. The overall is that people are in a tough place, and we are coming into. We've put enough of what we had of the resources out there, but come January, if things don't change in a different direction, January and the next budget is going to be extremely tough. But we say that, but as Vermonters, we work together, we try to get things done, but people need to, I think we found this out, I think we always knew it, but it was just really accentuated with your essential employees, and that the wages that they're making are not livable wages, and that living in Vermont, these are the people that we count on to take care of our health and teach school and childcare. It's what makes all the rest of us, the economy, work. And taking a good look at like where we're going to go next with what changes come January. It's going
to do some of you had to add. I was going to touch on the budget, but if you have a thought.
Yeah, I second that in terms of it's going to be tough coming up, and I think that we've learned lessons, and I think we can apply those lessons, and we've learned to count on each other. And I think also there's no secret that Stowe is an incredibly expensive place to live. $800,000 is the average price of a home here.
Wow.
Okay, so you got people who want to you've got young people who want to grow up here, they work here. They want to live here, but they're living in Wolcott or Hyde Park because it's more affordable. And that's also where our employees are coming from for to a large degree. Housing is an incredible issue, and it's definitely something that I'm focused on for the future, affordable housing. And there's so many really creative, cool ways that you can approach that I've seen across the country in my travels. I did a lot of work for Cabot, traveling around the country and seeing a lot of this. Also NVU and our community colleges, and Bill Stritzler wrote a really nice piece in Vermont Digger a couple of days ago about how he owns Smuggler's Notch and how that's a feeder for him. These young people, or not even just young people, but these students, they learn the hospitality industry and they come there and they want to stay there. Get people to stay. Tax base, obviously, we need to expand that, and that gets into broadband, affordable housing, and all kinds of things. But I think we have opportunities going into the future. I think that either we seize them or we don't, but we have to seize them. And like Diane said, working together collaboratively is going to be really key. We'll get through it. We'll
Yeah,
get
I
through it.
I met
There's,
Bill. I met Bill at a disc golf tournament a couple of years ago.
I believe it.
What an amazing guy and what he's done creatively, and still running the show after so many years. Really amazing, community-minded person for his team. And when I think about sometimes the angst that is talked about between bigger business or their employees, I mean, Smugs is not a small business, but he really does seem to care deeply for his employees, and I know many others do as well. And they're trying to figure out how to use these state supports to keep their folks working. You just brought up something, Joe Sable, that made me think about if folks are living in Hyde Park or up that way, do the ski areas have buses that they use normally during the ski day to shuttle people from parking lots that they could use to shuttle their employees in to save their employees, gas money and make more spots in their parking lots? Or, is anything like that being
We
talked
have
about?
GMT, but it's not on a regular schedule. We have the ski shuttle through Stowe during the high seasons, but it only runs basically Route 100.
Hmm.
So, and I'm sorry, 100 and 108, which is the mountain road.
Right.
But in terms of bringing employees in, no, and that's a great solution. Of course, in the time of COVID, it would be a challenge. Um, but yeah, absolutely. And as we are going to talk more and more about a green economy and about sustainability and environmental issues, that's absolutely something that we'll need to talk about, is how we can, in a rural area, how can we incorporate some sort of mass transit, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, and Diane, I'm also worried, you talked about the budget for the coming year, and projections are that the budget starting next July might have $100 or $200 million hole. We do have rainy day funds,
Mhm.
and
mhm.
I'm curious, what the thing is. Like, is this what one would call raining? I mean, I would think we would call this as raining as it gets, to make sure that those support systems that are out there for when we come on hard economic times, heating assistance, housing assistance, and otherwise, that those are not cut in the coming year when people are still struggling. We saw our unemployment rate drop recently, but we also saw that far fewer people are in the employment pool. So the rate dropped because some people just aren't even looking for work anymore because it's been so impossible to find work. Um, just a minute on that, and then I'm going to wrap it up if you want to talk
Okay.
about the budget for a minute.
Well, it was really, really quick. The answer is yes. One of the things that I'm very proud of having been in, particularly in that committee, is that over the 10 years of we've had economic strength building over the 10 years from, coming in at the last crisis and building out, that our reserves are top notch, sir. And because we've taken and making sure that our reserves were full, we were able to take our COVID dollars and put it to work out into Vermont. And one of those being is the thing that we need to keep an eye on is the bridge funding that we put in, that we made sure was in, because it wasn't in there before, was to our state college system. So
That's
they
right.
have bridge dollars that they're going to need to come back, and everything just isn't fine forever. There was areas that have been given bridges to a future and allowing them to come back with the changes. It's going to be a difficult one, but our reserves are intact. So far, we have not needed to go there. And when we looked with Moody's, trying to figure out where we're at, Vermont is in far better shape than most other states. We have I think it's like something close to 14% reserves, where average states are at 7. We have the capacity over $200 million in our reserve. I'm not advocating that we use it all, but we're looking at right now, as of this morning, the Joint Fiscal Committee met at $180 million off. It's not a deficit, it's a gap between if we continue. The administration right now is calling for level funding. And we know that, again, a level funding is a 2% reduction in most places. And it'll be us working together to try to figure out using some reserves. Other things will come in better, some things won't, but making sure, like you said, that we don't balance this budget on the back of our most vulnerable. What I do is I appropriate, which means that I balance the priorities of Vermonters' priorities against the taxpayers' ability to pay. And that little tension right there, and that's what we do every year, and we balance it every year.
Well, and you mentioned we've built that reserve over 8 or 10 years, so that's
Yes,
the consistency of the legislature over those 10
yes,
years,
yes,
along with multiple governors. Sometimes folks like to take credit for everything, but frankly, it's spread out credit that is deserved all the way around, which is the way that Vermonters are. We're frugal and smart. But we also know there are tremendous needs out there. And if we
yeah,
just, for instance, cutting 2% out of a $7 billion budget is about 140 million. So some sounds like from the administration is saying, well, maybe we could live with spending 140 million fewer dollars when to help close that $180 million gap. But we do have the rainy day funds. And what would those 2% cuts mean? And I do think
yeah,
it's really important that folks think about your own budgets. You don't just say, I'm going to take 2% off every single thing that I spend money on in my house. You say, well, this year, maybe I'm not going to do this project that was going to cost a lot of money. And that way I don't take money away from food. I don't take money away from heat. And so we need to make sure as a state we look at all of those things.
yeah.
Um, any quick last thought before I give the thank yous and we wrap up? It's okay if not. We've had great coverage.
No, it was
Um,
great. Thank you to both of you. Thank you. And I've
well,
learned so much. Thank you.
Well, you're going to be a great legislator. Anybody who wants to help Jo Sabel can look her up online and donate. It's quite a race up there in Stowe. And Diane, I think you've got a race as well, if
Yes.
I'm not mistaken. So folks can look up Jo Sabel or Diane online, I'm sure, and can find ways to help them out. And of course, Zuckerman4VT.com if you have an interest in getting involved with my campaign for the last 2 weeks, so we can make sure we are supporting Vermonters and our small businesses in this really amazing collaborative way. I want to thank Representative Diane Lanpher and Sabel Courtney, candidate, joining me for this conversation and for running both for office again and for the first time. The work you're doing on behalf of Vermont and Vermonters, you've talked about the different activities you've been in over the years. And I want to thank everyone who joined us for this conversation today. If you have additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can do so at info@zuckerman4vt.com. If you have a question for one of those two, you can send it to me. I'll make sure we get it over to them so they can reach out to you. Again, that's info@zuckerman4vt.com. 4 is spelled out FOR, by the way. And just, of course, a reminder, we have 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks. It's election season. We want to remind you to get your ballots in the mail. You're supposed to mail them, I think, by Monday at the latest. If you're going to not bring them in person, try to get them in the mail by Monday. Over the weekend, you could fill them out if you haven't done so yet. But get them in the mail just in case the slow mail process bungles it up a little bit. We want to make sure it's to the polls by Tuesday night. Just so folks know, as of this morning, there have been over 165,000 Vermonters have already submitted their ballots. That's projected to be about half the turnout if we have a 70% turnout. Normally we have in a presidential year 60 to 62%. We'd love to have 100%. But get your ballot. Think about who you could vote for up and down the ticket. Hope you'll consider all of us and get that voted. We are on track to break records with that 165,000 ballots. And I just want to point out, you can mail it in, but you can also put it in the envelope and bring it 2 envelopes. There's the mailer envelope, which is the outer envelope, and there's the ballot envelope that you have to sign, which is the inner envelope. Bring those to
Yes.
your town clerk, your drop box. And if you make a mistake, you can bring that to your clerk and get a replacement ballot. If you fill in 2 ovals when you should have only filled in 1 because you thought you could do 2, go to your clerk. You can trade it in. In fact, if you've lost it, you can sign an affidavit and get another one on election day, I believe. Maybe ahead of time, but you should check with your clerk. But many town clerks have installed drop boxes, so you can bring them to those drop boxes at hours when your clerk isn't open. And then, of course, on November 3rd, you can always bring it if you had not gotten it in yet. So thank you for watching. Thank you for voting. Reach out to all of us, ask questions. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.